Welcome to Should Have Bought That. I'm Mitch. Today we speak to Dr. Jane Homewood. She's an urban planner and she talks about what cities will look like come 2040 and also talks about what you need to look for in the future when you're purchasing a home. Let's get into it. Jane, welcome to Should Have Bought That. Thanks for coming along.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's okay. Today we're talking about everything about urban planning, urban renewal, the future of what housing will look like in Victoria. So we're going to try and learn a little bit here from your own expertise. Can you summarise in maybe a couple of sentences what is urban planning?
So urban planning's in Victoria, there's a state planning policy framework and a planning scheme, and that sets out the rules of what uses and activities can go where. And it sets that by zoning. So it'll say this is a residential zone, a commercial zone, public purpose. And so that sets out, and planning's been going on for decades and decades. It sets out what goes where, and the Minister for Planning approves any changes to that planning scheme.
Yeah.
And that is generally administered by the local council. So for example, where we are today, this used to be industrial land, and the council would have identified that because of gentrification and the change in manufacturing in industrial land, that this was a fantastic location for higher density residential development. So now the council would have to ask the minister if they could prepare a planning scheme amendment to change the zone of the land.
Okay.
And you'd have to do strategic justification to show the reduction in demand for industrial land and the demand for well-located housing, which at this time is kind of one of the highest focuses of the state government of increasing housing. Here you've got great access to shops, really good access to public transport, either a bus or a train station, and incredible amenity. And you try to balance environmental, social and economic outcomes. And at the moment, and you'll probably get onto it with climate change, there's increasing work in urban planning to look at how are we going to manage the impacts of climate change like floods, bushfires, heat islands, and really protect the health and well-being of communities. And the planning scheme should be leading and planning how you start to do that.
Let's talk firstly about COVID, probably more recent times, and how that changed the landscape in terms of urban planning, but also construction and planning approvals.
So in COVID, the state government was really concerned about a slowdown in the building industry and construction industry. So you might have remembered people building towers or in the construction industry were able to get much easier access to attend work. And that's because about 30% of the economy, Victorian economy, relies on construction and related businesses.
Yep.
And then to really give surety to and demonstrate that the state government was really supporting the industry, we established a fast track called development facilitation so that projects that were stuck in council or often a state government agency like VicRoads or one of the water authorities, it was a group of planners dedicated to really fast track, not have delays in planning approvals, to get planning approvals in as quickly as possible. I'll just add the other thing, which is really now flavour of the construction industry now. Over that time, the cost of materials and the cost of trades significantly went up, and quite a few of the volume builders went bankrupt just because they'd agreed to a set price, a fixed price, and the cost of material and the lack of trades just meant that they couldn't
prices up.
Put the prices up. Yep.
It was a pretty brutal time. One thing you don't hear often, I said off camera before, was fast tracking when it comes to planning approvals. How did that process come to life? Was that direction obviously from the state government, or
it was a direction of
to
state
say we
government
need to keep the industry alive?
Yeah.
And fast. Like how quickly is a fast track?
And well, it varies, and there's there's development facilitation that will turn really significant developments around in 6 to 10 weeks, 3 months if it's a master planned environment. But the government's also introduced a whole lot of new, like code assessed or deemed to comply, so that if you meet certain standards, then the council can't refuse the application and it's fast-tracked through. And the next thing that they're doing at the moment is they've just set this target of 800,000 houses to be constructed in 10 years, in a decade. We're not on target, but
Do you know what we're at?
I think the last count was around 50,000 dwellings, which is really low. We at the peak in kind of 2018-19, where I think when we really peaked, I think we're around 100,000. So it's quite a drop. But again, I think that's materials, increased interest rates, nervousness about what's happening in the world, but also that it's more expensive to construct many kinds of housing. It's more expensive than if you buy something that's in the market. So the Property Council's saying that for supply to get back to the rates that we were at, the cost of housing has to go up, and that's pretty scary for people wanting to get into the market for the first time.
Absolutely. And when you talk about these sort of planning approvals, just backtracking a little bit to that initial conversation, what sort of construction projects are these? Big high-rise towers?
It really ranges. So the target wasn't specific about the kind of housing typology, although the state government does have a target of 70% of housing to be built in established areas and 30% to be in growth areas. Pre-COVID, over 50% of growth was in the greenfield areas.
Yeah. And what's a greenfield?
A greenfield area is on the fringe of the city. It's where you've rezoned farmland to residential land, and it'll be a planned community. The Victorian Planning Authority does the master plan, and they'll partner with the volume building industry to make sure that it meets the requirements that are set out in the planning scheme. But it's those areas on the fringe, and it's not just in Metro Melbourne. So you've also got the big northern growth area in Geelong that's being planned at the moment.
Yep.
And then that, if you've been along that Apollo, the coastline, you can see the growth of Geelong kind of spreading down the coast.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the goal of 800,000 homes in a decade, we're talking new homes out in the urban edge.
So it's a mix. So the target's 70% in established and 30% on that greenfield. I think what I'm hearing in the market by a number of the really large high-rise developers is that it's no longer feasible. It's really, without subsidy through, say, the Housing Australia program, it's really difficult to get projects to stack up, and it's costing more to build them than that they can sell. So that's where the Property Council's been saying that property prices are going to need to increase to actually cover the cost of building. That's the cost of steel. There are some figures around the additional cost. Those high-rise sites have a union cost on them. I've heard various figures quoted at 30 to 40% of additional cost as a result of the unions on site. The volume builders are saying there's too much red tape, it's taking too long to release the land. And I think they're hoping that there used to be about 8 PSPs approved a year. That's down to 1 or 2 now.
Yep, and a PSP?
So that's a precinct structure plan for those greenfield areas.
Right. Yep.
But of course, for the state government, when you build these really big communities, and the northern growth areas plan to be the size of Canberra, they're big areas. And if you think of the infrastructure in Canberra, the state government's got to put in for the roads, the public transport.
Yeah, there's no public transport or limited out in those areas, those far-reaching areas at the moment.
And the state government is really focusing on SRL, and that's that, mid-metropolitan circular route. But for people living on the fringe, you don't want to rely on the car, because roads like the Hume are predicted to slow down to 30 kilometres an hour because you've got this massive growth in new residents, but you haven't been able to bring on the matching roads and public transport so people have an alternative to get in their car.
Okay, so we're not getting many houses built first and foremost. At the moment, we've got construction costs
Yeah.
at an all-time high, you'd say. So it's making it very hard to build these homes. And then obviously there's a lot of people coming to Australia, from what I can understand. Hearing in the media, as a first home buyer, what is your advice to someone?
For a first home buyer, I think a lot of people got trapped. Assume that interest rates might go up. Make sure you've got a buffer.
Yep.
And then I think a lot of it's got to do with what's important to you. But I think you've got to be aware. So often a PSP and a developer, a volume builder for one of these estates, will advertise that the train's coming, there's going to be schools. A lot of those, the houses usually are delivered first, and then the roads, the public transport, the schools, the community facilities come afterwards. So you really want to check with the local government that those community facilities are coming on board, they're in the budget, so that if you're going to rely on local schools, local community facilities, that they're in those council budgets and they're going to be delivered. A lot of the volume builders will actually build and construct some of those community facilities. Check whether or not the train station is going to be delivered, because there's some where the volume builders will promote that there's going to be a train station, but it hasn't come and it's not in the state government forward budget.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's really important is, particularly over COVID, I don't know if you remember the cladding fires.
Yeah, I do remember that.
The building standards, and we've now got a new building commissioner who's working incredibly hard to improve the building standards. But I'd get a registered building surveyor to check the quality of the property. When I was in the department, my colleague who was leading building would go and visit houses where damp-proof courses weren't put in, so water was running in between wall cavities. So you really want to check, one, that what you're being promised is going to be delivered is there in the budget and you've got a timeline for it being delivered, and secondly, that you've got a quality build. I think the other thing is to be thinking about where you're going to work, where your kids are going to school. I went out with the Minister of Planning to the Donnybrook estate, and there was a woman, who by the time she drove her child to school and drove back, she couldn't actually have a job because it was taking her a couple of hours. So if you're going to move into an area, I'd go and test out, how do you get to school?
All those kind of things, absolutely. Moving forward to, you hear about areas are going to create satellite hubs and, out obviously 50, 60 k's from the city, etc. Do you think that's the future, where people will literally have these little cities away from the CBD to then live and operate and not really come into the CBD? Yeah. Is that the plan?
So talking to many of the councils that are out in those areas, many of them do not come into the central city. And increasingly, those councils and those council regions want to make sure that all of the things that you have in a capital city you can have in their area. So if it's Wyndham, that you've got a good football stadium, a lot of jobs and a range of jobs. A lot of research shows that you'll never get that kind of capital city agglomeration of smart and knowledge economy. Those people generally at the moment like to be, around Parkville, which is the third most prosperous knowledge medical research centre in the world. But the more that we can have, like Werribee's got a cluster of hospitals, research institutes, specialised schools, if we can build on that, that means that people in Wyndham can live and work locally and save all that time commuting, which is really bad for your health and well-being, not great for families. So you want to have all those facilities out there. In terms of, what the future of the city looks, a lot of the researchers are saying, we have to have a compact city, but a lot of communities don't want to live in the inner city. So the theory says it's much more sustainable and much more affordable to have higher density populations in the inner city with good access to transport, hospitals, schools. But a lot of people are not wanting to do that. They want to live out in a greenfield area, on a block, with their community. So I think it's really hard to predict what the urban form will look like. Clearly, we don't want to keep eating into our farmland. Like, we really want to have good, healthy, local food. I think the other thing you probably heard, there was a recent court case where the United Nations said that, in fact, states are liable for addressing climate change and the Paris Agreement. I reckon that will really change how we develop our cities because we need to be carbon neutral. According to an academic I'm working with, Dan Hill, we can't actually build any more houses and meet the Paris target. Other people are saying, well, we need to work out how to build sustainable steel. I think artificial intelligence will help us, but we need a game changer. Like, we're not sustainable at the moment. And there are report backs of people, in those massive heat waves. They're in uninsulated houses, that it's
pretty scary.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, absolutely. Nightingale housing. Do you think you'll see more of these types of builds? And
so I know a little bit about Nightingale. So they build for purpose. They are green developments, so don't provide car parking, provide communal laundries. Really,
train station.
Yep. Really, really great locations with really good access to shops, where that 20-minute neighbourhood thing where you can walk to achieve almost all of your daily needs. It's a different way of living. It's more of a communal living. And I think many people like my age would prefer to live in communal living like that than in an aged person's home. I think younger people are finding it's more affordable. So it's a really quality product with very, very high environmental standards, healthy building materials, high star ratings. So you've got low ongoing costs. I think that will suit a lot more people. I think alternate models to high-rise apartments or greenfield, house on a block, I don't think we have enough, and I think we will need to move to more cooperative housing and then build to rent. So build to rent, often invested by super funds, is a long-term secure rental. I think that the difficulty with rental for many people is they don't have secure rental. They can be turfed out if the owner says, oh, my brother's company needs a place to live. So I think those models that give a range of income, social, affordable, top-end renters, at the moment build to rent's really for the high-end market with really high costs.
Yeah.
But if in the rest of the world, there's a lot of, particularly in the US, there's a lot of really affordable product. And I reckon a lot of people would make a choice that if they knew their rental increases were limited to CPI and it was secure rental, I reckon they're the kind of products we need to invest more in.
Environmental sustainability, how do you see that impacting sort of future generations, the way we build?
Yeah, so to meet our Paris Agreement climate targets, we have to radically change.
Yeah. How do we fix that?
So the work I'm doing at Melbourne Uni at the moment is saying we need to, it's radical. No steel. We have sandwich walls made out of hemp, all renewable, regenerative material. I kind of can't get my head around how long it would take for the industry to change because we invest a lot in steel. Most of our high-rise materials are imported from China. I don't know whether that will continue. I think we might need to have lower carbon, more sustainable, locally developed materials, but it's such a change to what's been happening at the moment, And I think that the federal government and the state government are wanting to invest in prefab, and the more that we can do that, but it's a real game change, isn't it? Because we got out of manufacturing industry. We don't build cars. We stopped building, we don't make glass. So it's a big shift, but I think that's where we're going to have to go.
Interesting. Crystal ball, 2040, where will first home buyers or where will people be living and what will they be purchasing? If you can look ahead 15 years from now.
There probably won't be a thing of planning permits and approval. I think artificial intelligence will do all that. You'll submit your plans. It'll tell you whether you comply or not, if you want to vary it. I think you should be asking an 18-year-old that, not me. But I reckon people will want to live in more stronger communities. A lot of research shows like 6, 7, 8 stories housing is a lot more desirable than 20, 30-story towers. And I think we're going to run out of land and farmland if we keep building greenfield. So I think we're going to have to kind of retrofit what we have. Ideally, people could live in Seymour, Ballarat, Bendigo, Castlemaine, and they could get a fast train into the city if they needed to come in here. Our travel patterns are so based on our work. I hope that our urban development is much more closely aligned to healthy places to live. And at the moment, I think some of the places we're building have really bad consequences for people for health. I worry so much about people on the fringe sitting in traffic for 2 hours, late to pick up their child from childcare, $100 fine. People are cranky. Like, this is just not a way to live. So if we can, to your point, create those satellite cities so that in the north, the size of Canberra, you've got all of the amenities of Canberra, we stop spreading, and we just make our cities denser. I think nature, all of the theory says, in Denmark, I think it is, the doctors prescribe you going out in nature. Like having really beautiful parks, people being able to get out of both, formal recreation but informal recreation and retrofitting our cities. There's some theory that says once a city gets over 5 million, the amenity and livability drops off. Melbourne's heading to be over 5 million. The Infrastructure Victoria says we can't afford to build the fast trains, but maybe through AI and we can find cheaper ways to construct sustainable transport.
Jane, thank you so much. I've learnt a truckload, and I'm sure our listeners will learn a lot and have a lot of insight. So thank you for coming along.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening. That was Dr. Jane Homewood. A lot of information in there about the future of housing and potentially what to look for when you're purchasing your family home for the next 10 to 15 years. Look forward to seeing you next time.